6 months ago, my ex laughed in my face and told me my hobbies were a waste of time. She'd roll her eyes when I spent hours building my setup, mock me in front of friends, and joke about how no one would ever pay to watch this. Now, every week, she pays for a subscription to see me do exactly what she once ridiculed, and she doesn't even know I know. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's about turning the very thing someone used to humiliate you into your biggest win. Before all of this, my life was pretty simple. I worked a regular job, came home, and lost myself in the one thing that had always made me feel alive, my hobby. Some people unwind with Netflix, some with a bar crawl. Me? I built, streamed, and shared my passion with a tiny but loyal online audience. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't paying my bills, but it was mine. When I met her, I thought I'd struck gold. She laughed at my jokes, asked about my projects, and even sat beside me a few times while I worked, pretending to be interested. I should have paid more attention to the way she'd scroll on her phone while I explained something, or how her support always came with a quick subject change. But I wanted to believe she respected it, respected me. The first cracks showed during a dinner with friends. Someone asked about my weekends, and before I could answer, she jumped in. "Oh, he spends them talking to his imaginary friends online," she said with that little smirk she had when she thought she was being clever. Everyone laughed. I did too. Or at least, I pretended to. But inside, I felt something tighten. It didn't stop there. She started making jokes in front of my family, rolling her eyes if I mentioned a new project. In group chats, she'd drop little digs like, "He's in his cave again," pretending it's work. At first, I brushed it off. People tease each other in relationships, right? But there's teasing, and then there's taking every opportunity to chip away at someone's confidence. I told myself she didn't mean it, that maybe she was just insecure or didn't understand why this mattered to me. But then came the social media posts, little funny videos of me mid-project, captioned with hashtags like #GetAlife and #ProfessionalHermit. She'd post them without asking, tagging me so her friends could join in. And they did. Every time I opened my phone, there it was, another jab, another reminder that the thing I loved was now a punchline. I started avoiding her when I worked. I'd wait until she was out to record or stream, moving my gear into the smallest room in the apartment just to have some peace. She thought it was hilarious. Hiding your little toys from me," she'd say. "It's okay, babe, I'll still pay your internet bill." That last one hit differently. Maybe it was the smug way she said it, or the fact that she genuinely thought she was doing me a favor by letting me pay for my own humiliation. Either way, it stuck with me. Looking back, I think that was the turning point. Because after that, I stopped trying to defend myself. I stopped laughing along, and I started planning. Little did she know, every word she threw at me was pushing me closer to proving her wrong in the most satisfying way possible. It was a Saturday night, the kind where most couples go out to dinner, maybe see a movie. We'd been invited to a small get-together at one of her friends' apartments. 10, maybe 12 people, most of whom I'd only met in passing. It was a cozy setup, fairy lights strung across the balcony, music low enough that you could still hear the clink of glasses. I remember thinking it would be a good night. For the first hour, it was fine. People mingled, swapped stories about work, travel, random gossip. I was parked in the corner with a beer, chatting with one of the guys about building custom rigs. It felt nice, like maybe I'd found someone who got it. Then she slid into the conversation. "Oh, don't get him started," she said with a laugh, interrupting mid-sentence. "He'll talk your ear off about cables and screens and whatever else he wastes his weekends on." The guy laughed politely, the kind of laugh people give when they're not sure if it's okay to find something funny. I forced a smile, telling myself it was nothing. But she wasn't done. A few more drinks in, someone asked her how we'd met. She told the story, but somewhere along the way, it turned into a roast. She mimicked my voice, exaggerated my excitement over meaningless tech upgrades, and even acted out how I lock myself away for hours. People laughed, and this time, it was the kind of laughter that makes your skin prickle. I felt heat creeping up my neck, that burning awareness that every eye in the room had just flicked toward me. I wanted to say something sharp, something that would shut her down, but my brain was a mess of static. Instead, I just sat there, beer in hand, pretending to be unbothered. But inside, something was shifting. I caught one of her friends watching me, not in sympathy, but in that smug, guess she runs the show kind of way. And maybe that was the moment I realized this wasn't harmless teasing. This was about control. She wanted everyone to see me the way she saw me, small, laughable, dependent on her approval. I barely spoke for the rest of the night. I nodded when people talked, smiled when someone made a joke, but I was counting the minutes until we could leave. The whole ride home, she chatted about how much fun she'd had. Not once did she notice my silence. Or maybe she did and enjoyed it. When we got back, she tossed her bag on the couch and said, "Don't take it so seriously, babe. It's just a joke. Besides, you know you'll be back in your little cave tomorrow." She smirked and disappeared into the bedroom. I stood there for a long time, staring at the closed door, hearing the muffled sound of her phone buzzing. I didn't know it yet, but that was the last time I'd let her get away with turning my life into a punchline. But that was just the beginning of my nightmare. The Monday after that party, I was at my desk at work, half listening to a conference call, when my phone buzzed. A friend from college had sent me a link with the message, "Dude, is this you?" Curiosity got the better of me. I clicked. It was a short video on Instagram, grainy, shaky, obviously recorded on a phone. In it, I was hunched over my desk at home, adjusting a camera angle for a stream. The caption read, "Meanwhile, in the back cave, #GetAlife, #WeekendWarrior, #FutureMillionaireNot." There were laughing emojis, a couple of comments from her friends, the same ones who'd been at that party, adding their own digs. One read, "Does he come out for sunlight or just snacks?" Another, "Can't believe you put up with this, girl." My stomach tightened. I'd known she joked about my hobby in person, but seeing it in writing, broadcast for anyone to see, hit differently. And the worst part? She'd tagged me, which meant every mutual friend, every coworker, every random high school acquaintance now had a front row seat. I didn't say anything that night. Instead, I scrolled through her profile. Buried between brunch photos and gym selfies were more little comedy bits at my expense. Snapshots of my workbench captioned, "The Other Woman." A boomerang of me carrying a new piece of equipment with guess what was more important than date night. At first, I told myself maybe I was overreacting. Maybe she didn't realize how it came across. But then I saw the dates. These posts went back months, long before that party. I closed the app, but the images burned into my brain. All day, I replayed them in my head. Her smirk, the click of her phone camera, the way she never asked if she could share. It wasn't just casual teasing anymore. This was a running joke, a brand she'd built with me as the punchline. That night, she noticed I was quieter than usual. "What's wrong with you?" she asked, scrolling on her phone. "Lose a follower?" Her tone was light, but the words landed like a slap. "No," I said, keeping my eyes on my dinner. "Just tired." She smirked. "Well, don't stay up too late in your little studio. I need you to drive me to brunch in the morning." I wanted to confront her right then, to throw her phone across the room and tell her I was done being her joke. But something told me to wait, to see how deep this went before I made a move. Later that night, after she'd fallen asleep, I opened her Instagram again and scrolled down until my thumb ached. That's when I noticed something in the comments of an older post, a name I recognized, and my blood ran cold. Then I saw a comment from someone I knew, and my blood ran cold. The name in that old comment belonged to a guy I'd known for years, not a close friend, but someone I'd gone to high school with. We'd shared classes, traded jokes in the hallway. The kind of guy who knew enough about you to be dangerous if he wanted to. His comment under her video was simple, "Still wasting time on that nonsense." And her reply, "Posted for the world to see. Always. But hey, it keeps him out of trouble." It stung, but I told myself maybe it was just more of the same shallow teasing. That is, until the next morning, when I got a message from a mutual acquaintance, someone I barely spoke to anymore. The message was short. "You should see what she's saying in the group chat." I hesitated for a moment, but curiosity and the dull throb of anger won. He sent me a series of screenshots. They were from a private group she had with a handful of her friends. In one, she'd posted a picture of my setup, the lights, the mic, the monitors, and wrote, "Here's what $3,000 in man-child dreams looks like." Underneath, her friends had piled on, "Does he even know no one cares? Girl, you're basically dating a YouTuber without the fame." And then hers again. "Oh, please. He'll never make a cent off this. But it's cute he tries." I felt the air leave my lungs. It wasn't just the words. It was the certainty in them, the casual cruelty of someone who truly believed she was above me. I read through the rest, my hands tightening around the phone. More digs, more little updates about the cave, and his pretend audience. Each message was like a needle, sharp and precise, hitting the same spot over and over. I set the phone down, stared at the ceiling, and tried to calm the pounding in my chest. For months, I'd convinced myself it wasn't that bad, that maybe I was too sensitive, that she didn't mean anything by it. But this was deliberate. This was her performing for an audience, building her own little following on the back of my humiliation. When she came home that evening, she was in a good mood, laughing, tossing her bag onto the couch, talking about her day. I watched her, wondering if she had any idea that I knew. She caught my stare and smirked. "What?" she asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I almost laughed, because in that moment, I realized something. She'd been so sure of herself, so certain I'd never push back, that she didn't even think to hide it. She had no idea how wrong she was about to be. She had no idea how wrong she was about to be. The screenshots kept replaying in my head for days. At work, in the shower, even while I was streaming, her words were there, like a mosquito you can't swat away. But the more I thought about them, the more I started seeing a pattern I'd been too blind to notice before. It wasn't just the hobby. She'd been chipping away at everything that made me me. When I mentioned wanting to sign up for a weekend photography course, she'd laughed and asked, "Why?" "So you can have two useless hobbies." When I tried to get back into running, she'd told me it was a waste of time since no one's paying you to jog. Even little things, like what music I played while cooking, somehow became material for her commentary. Looking back, I realized she never outright forbade me from doing anything. That wasn't her style. Instead, she planted little seeds of doubt until I didn't feel like doing it anymore. It was subtle, quiet sabotage dressed up as teasing. And it worked, because I let it. One night, I was digging through some old files on my computer, looking for a photo I'd taken years ago. I stumbled across a folder labeled Gear Wish List. It was full of things I'd once dreamed of buying for my setup. Some were crossed out with notes in my own handwriting, "Don't need it right now." But others had little memories attached, like the time I mentioned a certain mic, and she'd scoffed. "That's rent money for a toy." That's when it clicked. It wasn't about the mic, or the streams, or the photography class. It was about control. The more she could make me doubt my passions, the easier it was for her to keep me in a box where she held all the power. And here's the thing, she was smart about it. To outsiders, it just looked like harmless banter. But when you live with someone who treats everything you love as a punchline, you start editing yourself before they can. You shrink without realizing it. I sat there, staring at that folder, feeling a slow burn rise in my chest. It wasn't just anger, it was something sharper. The kind of clarity that makes your pulse steady instead of spike. For months, I'd been reacting in little ways, staying quiet, hiding my projects, trying to avoid her commentary. But this wasn't a time for hiding anymore. I closed the laptop, leaned back in my chair, and thought about those group chat screenshots again. The certainty in her words. The smugness in her tone. She thought she knew how my story would end. She thought she was the one writing it. But this was the moment I decided to take the pen back. This went so much deeper than I thought. Once I saw the full picture, it was like someone had flipped a switch. Every sarcastic comment, every eye roll, every "just kidding," they lined up in my head like pieces of a puzzle I didn't know I was building. And in the middle of that puzzle was a single, undeniable truth. She thought she'd already won. I wanted to hit back. Hard. But the question was, how? For a week, I kept playing with ideas in my head. Some were petty. Posting my own digs about her on social media, accidentally, sharing unflattering pictures. Others were nuclear, forwarding those group chat screenshots to her family or coworkers. Every option felt tempting in the moment, but something in me wanted more than just payback. I wanted her to feel what I'd felt. Underestimated, dismissed, laughed at. But I also wanted to win on my terms. Not by tearing her down, but by building myself up so high she'd have no choice but to look up. That's when the idea hit me. I'd take the very thing she mocked and turn it into something profitable, visible, undeniable. If she thought my hobby was a waste of time, I'd make it pay. Not just a little. Enough that she couldn't ignore it, even if she tried. I made a list. Upgrades I needed for my setup. Skills I had to polish. Platforms I should branch out to. I researched streaming strategies, audience growth, monetization models. Every night after she went to bed, I stayed up 2-3 extra hours, tweaking overlays, refining my pitch, reaching out to other creators. But with every step forward, there was a shadow of doubt. What if she was right? What if no one cared? What if I was just setting myself up for an even bigger fall? The last thing I wanted was to pour months into this only to hand her more ammunition. I'd catch myself staring at the screens, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, thinking about the group chat, about those words. He'll never make a cent off this. It was like a dare I couldn't ignore. One night, around 2 a.m., I got my first breakthrough, a small sponsorship deal from a niche gear company. Nothing life-changing, but enough to cover a month's rent. I stared at the email, my heart pounding, the words blurring from the adrenaline. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about proving something to myself, that I wasn't the joke she'd tried to make me into. Still, I kept my mouth shut. She had no idea anything was changing. As far as she knew, I was still in my little cave, wasting time. And that was exactly how I wanted it. I spent sleepless nights planning. Finally, I knew what I had to do. The first few weeks of my plan were a blur. I poured every free minute into refining my streams. Better lighting, cleaner audio, more engaging segments. I stopped treating it like a side hobby and started running it like a business. And it worked. Numbers climbed. Slowly at first, a handful of new viewers here, a couple of donations there, but the momentum was real. My sponsorship deal went live, and I could feel a shift in the way my small audience interacted with me. They weren't just viewers anymore. They were a community. I still kept it quiet. When she asked what I'd been up to, I'd shrug and say, same old. It wasn't hard to hide. She barely paid attention unless she was looking for a punchline. Then one Friday night, something happened that felt like the turning point. A raid from a bigger streamer dumped over 100 people into my channel. The chat exploded, donations flew in, and by the end of the night, I'd made more money than I usually made in 2 weeks at my day job. I sat there afterward, staring at the screen, grinning like an idiot. For the first time in months, I felt in control. She'd been wrong, dead wrong, and I had the numbers to prove it. The next morning, she was heading out to meet friends. Don't get lost in your little world while I'm gone, she said, grabbing her bag. I just smiled and waved. If only she knew. A few days later, I got an email notification, a new subscriber. I opened the details and froze. The username was a little too familiar. A throwaway handle, but one I recognized from a long time ago. She'd used it once before when she'd been lurking on my social media without wanting me to know. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining it. But then I checked the payment details. The subscription came from her city, her exact bank provider. No doubt, she was watching me. Not just watching, paying to watch. I sat back in my chair, trying to process it. Why would she do that? Was it curiosity? Spite? A way to keep tabs on me? Whatever the reason, it was almost too perfect. The woman who'd mocked me for months, who'd called my passion a joke, was now financially contributing to it. For a moment, I thought this was it. The win. I'd proven her wrong, built something out of nothing, and now she was literally funding it. The irony was so delicious I almost wanted to send her a thank you note. But deep down, something told me this wasn't the end. Not yet. I thought it was over. I couldn't have been more wrong. At first, I ignored her subscription. I figured, fine, let her watch. Maybe she'd see the work that went into this. Maybe she'd even regret all the crap she'd said. But after a week, I started noticing patterns. It began with small things in the chat. A random username would drop oddly specific comments about my setup or ask questions only someone who knew me personally could know. Stuff like, still using that same old mic? Or, when's the last time you went outside? The first couple of times, I brushed it off as coincidence. But then one night, during a Q&A segment, the same account asked, how's the little cave? That phrase, little cave, was hers. She'd used it for months to mock me. I muted the comment and kept going, but my focus was shot. My eyes kept drifting to the chat, waiting for the next jab. And sure enough, they kept coming. Some subtle, some blatant, but all with the same underlying message. She still thought I was a joke. Then came the DMs. From other streamers, from viewers I didn't even know personally. Hey, some girl's been messaging me about you. Do you know a username? She's been sending me screenshots of your streams, saying weird stuff. I dug deeper and realized she was using alt accounts to poke around in my community, messaging people I collaborated with, dropping hints about who I really was. It wasn't just petty teasing anymore. She was trying to undermine me from the inside. The worst part? Some of my newer viewers started disappearing. A few sponsors who'd seemed interested suddenly ghosted me. I didn't have hard proof it was her, but the timing lined up too perfectly to ignore. One night, I caught her watching me from across the living room, her laptop open, the glow lighting up that familiar smirk. She didn't even try to hide it. "Big night?" she asked, eyes flicking toward my monitor. Lots of fans tuning in. I wanted to confront her, to call her out for everything she'd been doing behind the scenes. But something stopped me. If I blew up now, I'd be playing her game. And I was starting to realize she wanted a reaction. She wanted to drag me back into being the defensive, cornered version of myself she'd always known. No, if she was going to get her reaction, it would be on my terms. And it would end the game entirely. I leaned back in my chair, forcing a casual smile. "You'll see," I said. She raised an eyebrow, but didn't ask. And that was fine, because I already knew exactly what was coming next. What happened next made me question everything. It didn't happen all at once. The damage came like a slow leak, quiet, constant, impossible to ignore. A week after the first wave of her little sabotage campaign, my viewer count dipped. Another week, and one of my regular donors vanished without a word. By the end of the month, I'd lost 2 collaborations I'd been lining up for weeks. Every time something slipped through my fingers, I thought of her, smiling behind a screen, maybe even bragging in that group chat about how easy it was to mess with me. And the worst part? I couldn't prove any of it. Without proof, going public would just make me look paranoid. One night, I was midstream, trying to keep my energy up, when I noticed the chat moving faster than usual. At first, I thought it was hype, until I saw the messages. Snide remarks, personal jabs, bits of private information I'd never shared on air. I froze. Someone, and I didn't need 3 guesses, had dropped a screenshot from my private workspace into a small Discord server connected to my stream. The picture wasn't incriminating, but it was invasive. My notes, my equipment, my personal space, all put on display without my consent. I finished the stream, forcing my way through the last 20 minutes like nothing had happened. But the second the camera was off, I just sat there in the dark, my hands trembling over the keyboard. This wasn't just about pettiness anymore. She was trying to dismantle what I'd built, the one thing she couldn't control when we were together. And if I let her keep going, she'd win. But there was a problem. Everything I'd built was still fragile. My audience was growing, but it wasn't invincible. Sponsors were interested, but they weren't locked in. One wrong move, one messy public fight, and the momentum I'd worked for could vanish. I felt trapped. If I stayed quiet, she'd keep taking pieces of my work until there was nothing left. If I fought back recklessly, I could destroy my own project in the process. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying every insult, every smirk, every line from those group chats. Somewhere between 3 and 4 a.m., I realized there was only one way to end this. Not just stop her, end her power over me entirely. It would take timing, patience, and the kind of setup that left no room for her to spin the story. One chance, one hit, and it had to be perfect. I opened my laptop and started planning. If she wanted to watch me so badly, I was going to give her a front row seat to her own downfall. I realized what I had to do to end this once and for all. 2 weeks later, the stage was set. My streams had been steady again, not because she'd stopped, but because I'd stopped reacting. I kept my head down, acted like nothing was wrong, and let her keep watching. The more she thought I was oblivious, the more careless she became. I announced a special event stream to my audience. No details, just hype. I promoted it everywhere. Clips, teasers, vague tweets about closing a chapter. The curiosity worked. My viewer count spiked before I even went live. When the time came, I hit start streaming and greeted the crowd like it was any other night. The chat was buzzing, donations rolling in, everyone waiting for the big reveal. Out of the corner of my eye, I spotted her username in the list of subs. She was here. Perfect. I started with a story, vague enough to keep the tension, detailed enough for her to recognize herself. About someone who used to laugh at my passion, mock me publicly, and tell me I'd never make a cent from it. The chat lit up with angry emojis and messages of support. Then I pulled up a slide I'd prepared, side-by-side screenshots. On the left, her old public posts mocking my setup. On the right, my current stats, sponsorships, subscriber numbers, revenue. I didn't use her name, but the timestamps in her own words made it obvious to anyone who knew. The chat went wild. People flooded the screen with support, disbelief, and a healthy dose of mockery for whoever had underestimated me. I didn't need to say it was her. She knew, and the fact that hundreds of people were watching made sure she felt it. I wrapped up with a simple line. Funny thing about hobbies, sometimes they turn into careers, and sometimes the people who laugh the loudest end up paying for front row seats. The donations surged. The chat blew up, and her username? Gone from the subscriber list before the stream even ended. But the real payoff came later. Screenshots from viewers started circulating online, my side-by-side reveal, the story, the punchline. It spread fast, and by the next day, mutual friends were texting me things like, "So, she's not taking it well." Apparently, she deleted a bunch of posts and even made her account private. I didn't celebrate loudly. I didn't need to. The beauty of it was that I'd done it without a single direct insult, without breaking any rules. All I'd done was show the truth and let the world, including her, draw their own conclusions. That night, for the first time in a long time, I streamed without looking over my shoulder. She wasn't just out of my chat, she was out of my life. Finally, it was my story, and I'd written the ending myself. In the days after the stream, life felt lighter. The constant background noise of her presence, in my chat, in my head, was gone. I didn't realize how much space she'd taken up until it was empty. And for the first time in months, that space wasn't filled with bitterness. It was filled with possibility. My channel kept growing. Word of the Mystery X story had spread farther than I expected, and the curiosity brought in new viewers. Some stayed for the drama, but most stayed for the content. Sponsors that had gone quiet suddenly resurfaced, and a few new ones came knocking. But the best part? I didn't care about proving anything to her anymore. The revenge was satisfying, sure. I'd be lying if I said otherwise, but what mattered was that I'd built something real. Something that existed because I refused to let her define me. A couple of mutual friends tried to bring her up, like they were fishing for gossip. I shut it down every time. That's in the past, I'd say. And I meant it. The victory wasn't about keeping her name alive. It was about removing it from the story entirely. One evening, as I was wrapping up a stream, I glanced at the sub list. Packed with names, many I recognized, some brand new. Hers wasn't there, and it never would be again. That absence felt better than any donation or sponsorship. In a strange way, I was grateful. If she hadn't mocked me, pushed me, tried to tear down what I loved, I might never have had the fire to turn this hobby into something more. It's a twisted kind of motivation, coming from someone who wanted you to fail, but it worked. I still get the occasional message from someone saying they were inspired by the story. People who were laughed at for what they loved. People who were told they'd never make it. They tell me they're pushing forward anyway. That, more than anything, feels like the real win. Now, when I walk into my little cave, it's not a place I hide in. It's the nerve center of everything I've built. Lights, cameras, screens. Not toys, not a waste of time, but the tools of my craft. And every time I hit go live, I remember that night, that smirk, that certainty she had that I'd never amount to anything. She was wrong, and she had to watch me prove it. That's the thing about people who laugh at your dreams. If you're patient enough, sometimes they end up paying admission to see you live them.